The first example here is the fathah alif, and the alif here, which will always be extending the sound of the previous letter before with the fathah, is a vowel. It's always a vowel. So the alif will never have its own fathah, kasrah or dummah. Okay, and we're going to look at the Majidi script in a minute, where it looks like it's an alif but it's not actually an alif. Now the kasrah ya and the dummah waaw, in these two cases what we need to know is normally the ya and the waaw act as normal consonants, i.e. they normally have their own sounds and they're acting as letters. In the case of the long vowels, both the ya and the waaw are acting as long vowels, so they're no longer behaving as consonants. They're helping to lengthen the sound of the previous sound. Okay, so the ya and the waaw play a double role in Arabic. They can sometimes act as consonants, they can sometimes act as long vowels. So if they have a sakin or they have no marking at all, they're normally acting as long vowels. Alternate ways of writing long vowels. So in the scripts you can see the long vowels written in different ways. So on the left we have the long vowels alif, waaw and ya. Then we have a column which shows how they're normally written, i.e. in the sense we've just seen them written, and then we've got an alternate way of writing them. So we'll start with the alif. So in the normal column we have ma, and we also have wala. So the lam fathah alif is the normal way you'd expect it written, and the mim fathah alif is the normal way you would expect it written. Now in the alternate way, if we look at this word, we have sa, and then the mim has fathah, and there's this small little alif, so it's known as the short alif or the dagger alif, and that is another way of writing the long vowel alif. So that is sa ma, too long. And we've got the same thing going on with the waaw. We've got waaw, fathah, and then the dagger alif, so that would be too long as well, wa, and then we have tin, so that would be sama wa tin, 1 2 2 1 in lengths. The next one is the long vowel waaw. So here we have in the normal column the qaf with dummah and waaw. So the waaw there is acting as the long vowel, so that's qu, too long. And in the alternate column you'll see we've got inna, hu is too long. And what they've done here, we've got the ha with the dummah, and the little waaw that you see here is written so small in the, well, this is actually the Uthmani script. It's written so small it looks like a little sort of you could call it like a comma in a way. However, it is actually the long vowel wow, but it's drawn very small. So that last one there is hu, too long. It's an alternate way of writing the long vowel wow. And the last one is the long vowel ya. So we have here in the normal column the ra with kasrah and the ya acting as a long vowel. So we have re, too long. And the alternate way of writing that in the alternate column here, at the end of this word we have the ha with kasrah, and instead of writing the ya as we would expect, you've got this small symbol which is another representation of the ya, the long vowel. So that is also he. Alif or hamza. So we're going to cover a bit of an area where people get confused between what is alif and what is hamza. An alif can never be the first consonant in a word, because remember alif is actually a long vowel and is always a long vowel. It never is a consonant, as it is only used to lengthen the sound of a previous sound, i.e. the fathah. However, a hamza sitting on an alif can be at the beginning of a word. In the Majidi script, they do not keep the hamza on top of the alif, and hence one may think it is an alif, but in fact it is not. So let me explain this with an example. Here we have the word alhamdu in Uthmani and Majidi script. So Uthmani is on the top. Now in the Uthmani script, the al, which is the definite article, is actually hamzatul wasl and lam sakin. So the little wasla sign we can see there on top of the alif. So although it's wasla on top of an alif, it actually is in its own entirety hamzatul wasl. Now in the Majidi script, in order to make it easy for those people who are not Arab and do not understand grammar, they change the hamzatul wasl so it looks like an alif with a fathah. So they put a fathah on there so you know how to pronounce it, because the definite article at the top, which should be read as al. So to help you along, in the Majidi script they've taken away the wasla sign, put in a fathah, and most people, especially in those communities that learn from the Majidi script, they will just say it's a, at the bottom they will say this is alif fatah with the sound of a, but it's not. In the real Uthmani script, i.e. in its proper grammatical terms, this is hamzatul wasl, and it should carry a wasla, and you would not have fatah, kasrah or dummah on there. You have to know that this is the definite article, and in this case, when we're beginning with this word as the beginning of a sentence, it must carry the sound of a fathah. Okay, so the main lesson here is, at the bottom in the Majidi script, at the beginning of a word, what looks like an alif, it can never actually be an alif. That is not an alif. Alif can never be at the beginning of the word, because alif is only used to extend the sound of another sound. So it must be after another letter. So if you ever see an alif, or what looks like an alif at the beginning of a word in the Majidi script, it's actually hamzatul, well, it'll be one of the hamzas. In this case it's hamzatul wasl. Another example is this word, which is, these are both in your prayer, is ihdina. So we've got this again, top is Uthmani, bottom is Majidi. Same thing again, we have the hamzatul wasl, and in this case we don't have the lam after, because this is an imperative word saying guide, so guide us. So the hamzatul wasl again, in the grammatical sense, if you know this is an imperative verb and there are certain rules, we know that this should be read with a kasrah. And in the Majidi script down below, same thing again, they've dropped the wasla sign, they've put in the kasrah for us so that we don't need to worry about the grammar and understand how it works. So in the Majidi scripts it looks like an alif with a kasrah, but it's not really an alif. Again, alif cannot be at the beginning of a word. It is actually hamzatul wasl, but they've made it easy for those non-Arabs, for the non-Arabs. And at the end then of that word we have na. That is actually an alif, because remember, alif is being used to extend the sound of the fathah. And again, that alif in both the Majidi and the Uthmani script looks the same. It's only when you have the hamzatul wasl at the beginning that it becomes a bit confusing. So simple rule, in grammatical terms, alif will never be at the beginning of a word. It's actually one of the hamzas. So some examples of fathah alif. So we've just been through this one. This one is ihdina. So the fathah alif